The next story that I briefly want to talk about and that I want to share some thoughts with you guys on is this story of this girl, Megan Newton. And I want to firstly start off by sending my condolences out to her family, her loved ones, and anyone who knew Megan, because I'm sorry to tell you guys who are listening to this and who are watching this that Megan Newton unfortunately passed away last year. Stories like this make me sad because a girl who was so young, who was so bright, how is it that God can allow for her to sort of be put in a position where she loses her life just before she's about to start it? But let me give you a quick synopsis of what happened from what I understand it to be, and based on the articles that I've read. I'm giving you a synopsis. If you want to get the full story, go online, read for yourself. This was a big story. It was all over the papers, the Mirror and various different news outlets, so you can find the full story. But essentially what had transpired is you had this young girl who basically went on a night out. She offered a guy to stay over at hers because he was really drunk, and he got himself in a situation where he couldn't go home, which I think many of us have been. A lot of people in the UK have been in positions in their life where they've been so absolutely drunk they couldn't go back home, whether that would be to their family home or back to their missus or whatever. And so we've stayed with somebody, we sobered up the next day and then went home. So she gave this act of kindness, helped this boy who actually she knew because he had gone to school with her previously, and she'd offered him a place to stay. And what transpired over the period of about 90 minutes once he got to her home is that in that time she was not only strangled, she was then also raped, and she was stabbed 9 times in the back. Now, this guy who obviously has been arrested basically agreed that he and pleaded guilty to the fact that he had done all these things, and he has to serve a minimum of 21 years from what I understand in prison, because I think from what I've read about prison sentencing, if you are given a life sentence, a lot of the time a life sentence isn't actually life. It is usually 25 years, and usually you only have to serve, I think, about half of it or something on those lines. Comment below exactly what the mass is, because a lot of you guys know this area a lot more than I do, but you don't have to actually serve the full sentence. But if the severity of what you've done is to such a high degree, a court has, of course, the powers to basically say there is an absolute minimum that you will have to serve before you're let free. And so, yeah, so that was really, really bad. And let me talk a little bit about this story, because there's so many different angles I can go with this story. But the one that I particularly want to get to is, and I want to speak to you lads in particular when I talk about this story, and I speak from experience about the thing that I'm going to talk to you about, is that as men, lads, we have to get to the point where we recognize what our vices are. What do you mean by that, Cassim? What I mean, bro, is that as men, if particularly if you haven't been brought up with sort of authority figures, or you haven't, or you have the kind of proclivity that you're quite a strong-headed person, like you have what I call an extremist kind of leaning, where if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. If you say you're going to become a millionaire, you will almost 100% achieve it, because you will do anything at all costs to achieve that goal. I have that kind of mentality. If I'm saying I'm going to run 100 miles, I don't care whether I'm losing my feet, whether I'm on the brink of dying. If I say I'm going to run it 100 miles, I will run 100 miles at any cost. So, as men, if you particularly have that kind of proclivity and you've not really grown up with an authority figure, i.e. your father, i.e. an uncle, i.e. your grandparents, somebody who basically you respect and that can kind of restrain you, you have to get to the point where you recognize your vices and put things in place to stop you. Because I think we can agree every single one of us lads has our own vices, whether for some of us that be Mandy, whether some of us that be smoking, whether for some of us that be sex, whether for some of us that be bodybuilding, it be eating dysmorphia. Every single lad has their own vice. There is some things that you know in your life you should not go near. So, for example, for me, that is alcohol. I know that I do not want to be around alcohol. If I'm around alcohol, as much as and as disciplined as I say I am, I know that usually if I start drinking alcohol and I get past like 3 pints, I know I'll always take it too far. And then I'm going to get to a stage where I'm too drunk and I do some crazy stuff. So I now know always to put things in place so that I ensure that I don't get myself to a state where I can go crazy and I can go insane. Because as I was reading this article and I was reading about this, one of the things that the defendant solicitors use to sort of to sort of put forward as a story is this young man was absolutely smashed. In fact, as I was reading the story, he was actually stopped earlier on in that night and arrested because they found a bag of ketamine on him, which was confiscated by the police officers, and then he was let out on custody. And so what I'm saying to you is, look, when you get past the age of kind of 18, as a man, you need to start putting things into place around your vices that can protect you, that can stop you from going too far. And particularly I say this when you guys have that kind of leaning where you're very stubborn or you're very strong-headed, and the other people are people who haven't been brought up with a father figure or an authority figure. Because I was talking to my friends and we were talking about why is that men need fathers in their lives. Why is it so important? Because there are some people, right, who've been brought up in their lives with a mother and they're incredible human beings, right? They're kind, they're loving, they're hardworking. And so I was saying, it's not that, I mean, I was obviously joking, and I was saying to some of my friends, it's not that important that a guy has a father figure in his life. But of course, that led us down the path where I had to explain to the lads that part of having a father figure in a house or when you're growing up is because men need to be like almost, what's the word? Constrained, trapped, I don't know what the word that I want to use, but we need to kind of be pulled backwards. Because as men, the moment we reach 18, we exercise everything to its extremity. If we can take drinking, we take drinking to 100. If we can go party, we take party to 100. If we can take drugs, we take drugs to 100. And you need that father figure in your life to basically say, now you've gone too far. Right? You need that father figure to say to you, okay, when you get to 8 pints, now you need to start drinking water. Now you need to bring it back. All right? Don't mix alcohol with vodka, with drugs, because when you do that, you go crazy and you go into this mental state where you don't realize what you're doing. And as much as I say to like women, as much as women are amazing, the truth of the matter is, when a woman speaks to a man, it is different than when a man speaks to a man. If you have a prison officer, now stay with me here, guys. I don't want you writing some nonsense down in the comments below, but go with me. If I had a male officer tell me that I have to do something, it is very different to when a female officer tells me to do the same thing, right? Because a female officer, I know I'm stronger than her. I know that I can outwit her. I know I can probably outrun her. When a male one is there, it is different. Now, of course, I'm not saying that I would do that, but you get the point of where I'm getting to. Psychologically and subconsciously, men know that they're stronger than women. And so when we have an authority figure who is a male, it is very, very different than when we have an authority figure who's a female. I can share with you guys that when I look at a lot of research, many men, do you know what the #1 common denominator is of men who end up in prison? They come from housing where there is no authority figure who is a male. There is no father figure in the household. And so what I'm going to suggest to you lads is, if you've grown up in a house where there is no father figure, or you do not have a male figure who can stop you from going too far, find one. Do anything. Do you know what I had to do? Because many of you know, I obviously was brought up without a father. My dad died when I was 9 years of age. In fact, my biological father, I should say. But I was lucky because I had a male figure in my life. It was my stepdad. But without me getting into too much detail, when you're brought up with somebody who doesn't look like you, it's very, very, very difficult for you to see yourself in that person, especially if that person is not what you want to become, right? And my stepdad, when I was growing up, I didn't want to become like him. I didn't see myself as him, and like him being an older version of who I wanted to become. You know, like your father is like, you idolize them, they're your hero, you want to be like them. When I was growing up, I didn't want to be like my stepfather, and that obviously now has changed as I've grown older, because now I recognize all the great aspects of him as a human being. And so what I would share with you is, what I had to do is that I had to, because I didn't have father figures, I found aspects of people who I wanted to become like, or who had characteristics and traits that I aspired towards, and I started emulating them in my own life. So for example, I looked at people like Nelson Mandela, and Nelson Mandela, of course, was great for forgiveness. And I was like, do you know what? My father made my mum pregnant at 15, and he basically disappeared off the face of the planet. So do you know what? I want to be like Nelson Mandela, and I want to be able to get to the stage where I can forgive someone who I know I'm never going to meet in my life. Because if Nelson Mandela can be locked up in prison, his wife can be kept away from him, one of his children can die, and they won't even allow, the same black people he's trying to free won't allow him to go and to his child's funeral. That is sick. I mean, what kind of person would do something like that? And he forgave them. I was like, I want to be like that. I want to be like how he is, because that is incredible. That's amazing. And so that's what I started to do, because I didn't have male figures in my life who could stop me, or people who look like me, or who are black, that I could say, I can see myself being like that human being. But lads, going back to the story, you've got to find your vices, and you've got to recognize them, because a lot of lads, we don't get this lesson quick, and what we end up doing is we end up making mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, and the mistakes get worse and worse and worse and worse, right? Unfortunately, when it comes to mistakes, and I think you can agree with me on this, they don't just stop. You just saying, oh, I don't want to make these mistakes anymore. It doesn't work like that. Usually it comes to an abrupt end, where you either end up in prison, you do something crazy and you end up divorced, or cheating, or infidelity, or whatever it may be, or you lose your job. But I promise you that in my life, the things got worse and worse and worse, until I handled my vice, which was alcohol. I know alcohol is not for me. And it's one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to do, because I love alcohol. But I don't drink alcohol anywhere near to, like, if we go to a party or wherever, I'll have a beer or I'll have a Prosecco, but I cannot have huge amounts of alcohol, because it sends me like crazy, mental. So my question to you is, what is your vice? Comment below, guys. I want to hear what your vice is. When did you find what your vice was? Did something like really majorly bad happen to you, where you were like, no, I've really got to stop this, like I can't take this too far? When did you know? Did somebody tell you? And also, did you grow up with a father figure in your life that basically was like, right, don't drink too much, don't take this, don't take that? Or was that just something you picked up? I'd love for you to comment below. And maybe there's a story as well that you think you want me to talk about that would be interesting. Send me a message and I'll pick it up.